Good afternoon. Is my voice clear to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll start.
Yes, ma'am.
First chapter we had spoken about, if I remember clearly, we were talking about international trade. We were talking about trade theories. We had discussed about Ricardo and comparative advantage theory. We had talked about Hexer-Ohlin theory. The last part of your first chapter is your Krugman's model of intra-industry trade. Now, if you remember, which I'm pretty sure you would not have remember, we have read something about called as monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is something where we produce, or when it's a market situation where goods are sold, but then they are of similar characteristics or with a little, very little bit of differentiation. For example, if we are talking about toothpaste, Close Up, Colgate, Pepsodent. Three of them are tooth from the toothpaste industry, but then they are actually serving the main purpose of cleaning your teeth, but then they are same products of toothpaste, but they are of different brands and they are of little bit of different, like all of them are catering to the consumers with the same of cleaning the teeth, but then they are differentiated maybe on the basis of what product they are using, or they are differentiated on the basis of prices. So when we are talking about this kind of trade situation, this intra-industry trade is actually where we are exchanging similar products and it belonging to the same industry. For example, similar products and it is belonging to the same industry. Why do we use it international trade? It is because we are either importing them or we are exporting them. The best examples is when you are talking about automobile industry, or when you are talking about your computers, when you are talking about your hardware part of your computers, or when we are talking about any kind of minerals that we are exchanging, or any kind of foodstuffs or any kind of beverages that we are exchanging. Now, why exactly countries they export at the same time they import and export the products of the same industry, or why they exactly import and export the same kind of products? It is because if you'll see the classical or the neoclassical theory, at some point of time they are predicting that there is some kind of inter-industry specialization. Like you have read about in Ricardo, a country should be producing those goods where it is having a comparative advantage. For example, in India, if you'll see, we are more or less moving towards a manufacturing base. Like even if you'll see, when it comes to automobile industry, there are some part of those automobiles which are not produced in India, rather those things are imported to India, and then there are some parts of that automobile which is produced in India and the same part of them are exported. So in this case, the import and export of the products are of automobiles, like they belong to the same industry. But then what we do is we are actually looking for some parts which are where countries are very good in their production. Like in this case, the model basically uses economies of scale, or when they are like a preference is being given. For example, till this coronavirus, this COVID kind of situation arised, there were some parts where we were heavily dependent on China, and then at some point of time when we had cut our dependency on China, we have started producing it at our own, or we started being importing those kind of products from some other country. So as a result there is a heavy impact on the cost when we are producing it inside a country. That is something which we might not be very good in producing, but then we have started our own production, maybe in terms of quality or in terms of cost. We are making a no, at one point of time we are increasing that price or we are increasing that cost. Now when you see, yes, when you see, like, but then all consumers, they do not have the same preferences. Even today, if there are certain things that are made in India, there are consumers who are not preferring made in India. For example, when you are looking for buying of Apple iPhones, there are some of the iPhones which are produced in India, and then there are some of the iPhones which are produced in other parts of the world. So US वगैरह में जो produce होता है, there are iPhones which are produced in China. There is one part of a consumer who still prefers buying iPhones which are produced in US, or which are produced in China, rather than which are the produced in India. So when you are looking for consumers, they do not have same preferences. Some have a preferences for the style, some have preferences for the things that are produced elsewhere. And then when you are looking for domestic farms who are into the production, you will see like there is a particular domestic farm which when goes into production, the cost of production is a bit high. And when it is compared with the minority, when you are looking for the minority preferences, or when you are looking for making of goods, we see that when we are importing those goods, it is of higher cost rather than exporting. So based on that, Krugman has built upon his model where he says like today farms are basically looking for monopolistic competition where they are exchanging goods and services on the basis of cost of production. Like if there are some of the products of a particular car which are produced very cheaply in China, and then the cost of importing those parts is relatively lesser than the cost of preparing them inside one's own country, then it is always better for going on importing those goods. Like with this monopolistic competitive industry that we are talking about, when we are looking for a long term long range of profits, at a very long term you will see that uh, slowly as and when your imports are increasing, as slowly when there is a hike in your imports, the profits in the long run turns into zero. So it is better at one point of time that you prepare, you need to calculate the price and you need to calculate the average cost, then you need to see what is the number of farms you can do it, and then you slowly and steadily you start producing the product inside the country. When you are producing that country over a long period of time, you will see an increase in your profits as well as a decrease in your average cost. So that was what your Krugman has said. Like it is a very the whole theory is actually built upon your Hexarollin theory, and it is built upon your Ricardian model. And when this model has been done, there are mainly three types of industry that has been looked upon. One is your when it comes to homogeneous goods, then when it comes to your horizontal differentiated goods, and then when it comes to your vertically differentiated goods. So these are the intra industry that you can be targeting out. When it comes to homogeneous goods in terms of minerals, homogeneous goods in terms of foodstuffs and beverages that we talk about. When it comes to trade in horizontally different goods, like when it comes to horizontally different goods, it is basically on quality wise we are focusing. When it comes to vertically differentiated goods, it is basically on the cost that we are preferring. So it is homogeneous goods in terms of foods and beverages, foodstuffs and beverages. It is horizontally differentiated goods when it comes to quality index, vertically differentiated goods when it comes to the cost index. Now I'll move to the second part of your international business economics. Before going for the international business economics, let me tell you what is international business actually. It is international businesses where it is dealing with the nature or where it is dealing with the strategy and management of total international business enterprises, and what impact it does have on the business or what impact it have on your national performance. So when we talk about impact of international business on national performance, or what it impacts on the total business, we are basically talking about efficiency, we are basically talking about growth, we are basically talking about profitability, and we are basically talking about employment. So when it comes to international business, the strategy and management of this business enterprises inside a country, and what when these international businesses come, what it is having an impact on the national performance. National performance is when it is efficiency, growth, profitability, and employability. Now, this international business is actually interdisciplinary, and it draws among itself from different kind of management sciences. Like it draws from economics, it draws from politics, it draws from sociology, it also draws in terms of strategic and human resource management. Now, there are certain definitions which you need to understand. There is something called as FDI. What is an FDI? It is basically when you are when there is a control of production which takes place in the host country by a farm, and it is based on another country. Like there are two countries we take into account. There is one home country, there is one host country. Now, when we are talking about FDI is basically when the control of production takes place in one country by a farm which is based in another country. So suppose the home country of a farm X is America, but when it is coming into the production, when it is coming into production into say India, so the FDI is basically when the now company X is taking control over the production in Y. When say like the I mean like when that company X is taking the control of production in India. So company X is belonging to US when that company in US is taking control of the production in India. That is what FDI is basically. So when we talk about FDI, it is the actually the most defining feature of multinational corporations. With FDI, it brings about a host of changes in terms of growth, in terms of profitability, and in terms about new investment opportunities inside the country, inside the host country. Then we talk about globalization. Globalization is nothing but it is the integration of markets where there is an exchange of goods and services production, when there is a mobility of your resources, factors of production across the borders, like they are easily able to travel from one place to one country to another. The third aspect of definition we'll be talking about is farm. Farm is actually an organization which produces commodities and which sells them in the market for a profit, as well as it allocates the resources. When I say resources, it is basically the capital, the labor, and the whole mechanism of determining the price when demand meets the supply. Then we talk about an MNC. MNC is which controls production in countries similar with the FDI lines. Then we talk about market. You very particularly know what market is. Market is where your price mechanism is determined. Like it is an institution where your resource allocation is happening in through the voluntary exchanges. And when we talk about state, we are basically talking about an institution, a government who is very much responsible for allocating the resources, and it has a large influence on the economic activity of the organizations. Now, why are we going to study this international business? It is because today there has been an internalization of production. Today it has been there are many multinational companies, multinational corporations that has come up. With this multinational corporations, there has been concepts of globalization, there has been concepts of exports, imports, FDIs, there has been concept of international capital flows, international trade, and then with this we come towards understanding of international business. How does it started? Basically it started in 1980s, when there was by 1980s there was not much movement of the farms. They were moreover concentrating on increasing the size. Like one farm, it will be increasing the size so that it will cater to the total needs of the economy. Like it has increased its size in terms of four stages. First is, initially it is the owner which used to start a farm, and it was a very small farm. Then initially when it goes on increasing its size, it goes to a public limited or a national company. Like here you have a limited liability, there is a separation of ownership from the management. Third is, once you have catered to the domestic needs, you try and move on, like whatever goods you are producing, you are now planning to export those goods. Now you form into a multi-divisional organization, which is basically division based. Like it is separated on a long term basis, and the operational day to day decision has to be taken on. Like you have divided them into production, you have divided them into operation, you have to divided them into finance, all those categories. Then come the last stage of farms, which is called as your multinational corporations, where all kind of production activities have started in a host country. Like apart from producing in your own country, you have gone into production in another host countries. Then as this international business has evolved, as international business has taken up, we come into something called as a very multi-divisional structure. Like we talk about a head office at one point, then we talk about divisions that has happened according to in the countries. Like there are some central services, finance, which is next to your head office. Then we talk about divisions like division A, division B, division D, that is based on your the organization that you are having. Then it comes to a concept where like you are on the basis of say regions, or you are on the basis of continents like Asia, Africa, all those kind of things, where your companies are now divided. So if you are looking for international business, it is basically where international trade is happening, And there are, if you see the largest MNCs, there are around 350 largest MNCs in India, in the world, 350 largest MNCs, which actually account for 40% of the whole international business. So when I say largest MNCs, you can say like General Motors, Microsoft, Google, Exxon, they are some of the largest MNCs I am talking about. So if you calculate the total उन लोगों का अगर जीएनपी आप देखोगे तो 15 नेशंस के जीएनपी के साथ उनका अगर अर्निंग्स एनुअल सेल्स देखोगे इट विल बी समवेयर इक्वल टू द ग्रॉस नेशनल प्रोडक्ट ऑफ 15 नेशन स्टेट्स. अगर ये जो 350 एमएनसीज को आप काउंट में लेते हो एंड इफ यू सी व्हाट इज द एनुअल सेल्स ऑफ दिस 350 एमएनसीज यू विल फाइंड दैट इट इज ऑलमोस्ट इक्वल विद द GNP of 15 nation states. And if you'll see the trend of year wise trend, you will see that in the early 2000 US was one such country which had the maximum number of MNCs, and it was dominating the world market in terms of in terms of export, and it was dominating the world market in terms of creating the MNCs. अगर आप उस some of the facts देखोगे, so international business कब ये किया, like when it started growing somewhat in between 1991 to 2000, total international business started growing up, and it is growing by 33% per year, and it is mostly in the developing countries, and mostly today Eastern European countries are the main contributors to the MNCs. And if you are seeing among the developing countries, किसका share ज़्यादा है FDI में? It is China, whose share is more in case of FDIs. Now, when you are talking about leading players of international business, today, आज के time पे, the leading players of international business are US, UK, Canada, France, and Germany. Now, if you'll see, एक ट्राइड बोल के एक कंट्री है. ट्राइड मतलब देयर आर 3 कंट्रीज, यूरोप, यूएसए एंड जापान, जिसका टोटल एफडीआई जो है जिस ट्राइड कंट्री का टोटल एफडीआई जो है यूरोप, यूएसए एंड जापान, आपका जितने भी डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज हैं उनके साथ उनका ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट के साथ सेम आता है. लाइक टुडे यू आर सीइंग व्हाट एवर द अर्निंग ऑफ दिस ट्राइड कंट्रीज आर in terms of Europe, USA, and Japan. Today, whatever their earning is almost similar with what the developing countries are earning right now. So this is what I had to talk about your international businesses. But then over the time period, जैसे कि इंडिया में आप लोग जानते हो FDI and MNCs का कितना importance है. Like today, India is allowing FDIs. Like when I say India is allowing FDIs, the total FDI flow of India for 2021 is somewhat around $28 billion. Like इंडिया में उतना इन्वेस्टमेंट्स आ रहा है 21-22 के लिए. It is $28 billions, and today government of India has left no stone unturned. Like today it is attracting the foreign investors like anything. It is the best destination for the foreign investors, where they would be taking their decision in terms of making any kind of reforms in the FDI and investing in India. So this was all about, we talked about international business. Now going by what you have in your syllabus, we will be talking about some of the trade policies. Now when I say trade policies, there are 2 types of trade policies that happen. Like there is something called as multilateral trade policies, and there is something called as your unilateral trade policies. Initially, when trade between the countries started, there was a unilateral trade policy happening. Unilateral मतलब उससे पहले I'll tell you what a trade policy is. मतलब अगर हम ट्रेड करने के लिए जाते हैं, when we go for trade in some of the countries, we actually determine what is the size of the market and what are the farms that are present and what are the output and how it has an influence on the foreign and the domestic investment before going for a trade. Now, whatever agreements of the trade that every country has to go for, they have to go for in terms of World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization has written down the trade agreements. Like on the basis of this trade agreements, you will be going for trade, maybe whichever country you are in, maybe you are a developing country or you are a developed country. So उस मैटर में, like before going for a trade or before going and doing it, understanding what are the things that we will need to exchange, there are certain rules and regulations that has to be followed, and then you have to be member of certain organization. जैसे कि India is actually member of Middle Eastern Trade Agreement. So this is where मैं क्लास में हूँ, क्लास खत्म होने के बाद आती हूँ जी. Just a second. Just a second. मैं बताती हूँ आपको. Okay. Sorry. So before we go looking for trade agreement, it is actually WTO agreements that actually set up the rules and governing trade. We have to be a member of WTO. Currently, there are 154 members of WTO. Then there is something called as a free trade agreement. Just may be like once you are a member of this free trade agreement, there is a you can import and export. आपका जो भी policies रहता है, you will be allowed for entering into a trade at any point of time at anywhere. So whenever you are a part of free trade agreement, which is actually between US and 20 countries, उसके साथ ज़्यादा नहीं है. This is built on the foundation of World Trade Organization. So free trade agreement भी एक ऐसा agreement होता है, like you need to understand. Then there is another part is called as bilateral investment treaties. In case of bilateral treaties क्या होता है, आपके जितने भी private investment होते हैं, या whether you are trying to develop in some kind of market oriented policies for in a partner country, or you are trying to promote your exports in that country, in that part you are only concerned about a home country and the host country and nothing else. उस केस में क्या होता है, bilateral trade agreement में there are only two parties that you will be taking into account. It is either you as a home country or you will be taking into account the host country. For example, home country में आपका business है and you are trying and taking a decision for for a host country. You are trying to develop some market oriented policies. You're trying to develop some of the products which is lower in cost and it is more suitable for the developing countries. At that time you have to undergo into a bilateral investment treaty or bilateral trade agreement. So as I was talking about, there is something called as unilateral trade agreement. Unilateral trade agreement and multilateral trade agreement. So when it is unilateral trade agreement, it is between two nations. It is when you are dealing with the trade between two nations and it is one way round which you are dealing with. मतलब एक ही country से वो होता है. And like once as India, you have to undergo trade with just another country and nothing more. As India, you will be undergoing trade between one country and nothing more. Now, under this unilateral trade agreement, how it has been developed? See, initially when there was matlab trade, when it started, they first started looking after the nationality of the buyers and the sellers. Like they were looking after who are the key participants. Now, when it comes to trade, they have to understand like whether the buyers they are able to sell जो भी product का जो when we are doing a business deal or when we are talking about the product which is essential for exports, we have to understand whether it is according as per the standards of the export quality or not. And second thing is you should be knowing whether there is a heterogeneity across the market. Heterogeneity is like इंडिया में अगर आप देखोगे there is a right hand car driven like today India you'll see like the cars that you are driving is on right hand basis, but apart from India if you go to any other part of the world you will see that Americans they drive car and that too on the left hand basis, like उनका जो left side में उनका steering रहता है, brakes रहता है. So you have to understand what is the heterogeneity in the market. Like it is actually catering to the differences in terms of taste. It is catering to the differences in terms of fashions. It is catering to the differences in terms of all your customs, attitude, product services, and all those parts. इसका सबसे best example is if you look into China, people in China they prefer riding bicycles. Okay, मतलब Delhi commute के लिए people in China they prefer bicycles. In very contrast, people in Japan for the same distance के लिए they will prefer riding bikes, e-bikes, Japan में. And for if you will see that in contrast in India, we prefer any kind of such vehicle which will contribute more to the pollution. We do not care whether we are contributing to the pollution or we are contributing to any other kind. हम क्या करते हैं? हम bikes prefer करते हैं. So if you see China, they are basically concerned कि उनको अगर shortest distance cover करना है, they will not be polluting their environment. They are looking for something which will keep them fit, and this is like they can commute easily on bicycles. It is a very easy mode of communication. Similarly, if you look for Japan, they will not go for bicycles, rather they go for e-bikes for a shortest distance. And similarly, if you see Indians, we do not prefer such thing. We only prefer like हम गाड़ी में जाके हमारा काम करके आ जाएंगे. So when it comes to trade systems, unilateral trade systems, you have to understand like what are the differences that happens, or how there is a difference in terms of taste, in terms of fashions, in terms of language, in terms of business beliefs, business attitudes, in terms of product preferences. Similarly, there is another part which is called as your political system. So political environment is something which differs from country to country. Like one needs a very special effort to understand the political environment before entering into a trade. जैसे कि I think I might have given this example some point of time. POSCO at one point of time was trying to enter Odisha. Odisha has one of the major ports. एक बहुत बड़ा port है ओडिशा में. So POSCO, one being one of the South Korean companies, it was trying to enter Odisha. The very basis was it was thinking कि उसका जो भी raw materials या जो भी transportation cost होगा, if it is setting up a plant over there, then it will be in lower cost rather than preferring to go to any other part of India. But the political environment over there and many other customs and traditions over there, it didn't allow POSCO to set up a plant. POSCO altogether shifted its base from Odisha to Maharashtra. Now POSCO is based in one part of your Chakan, and it's doing well. So political environment, when you are trying to understand, it is just like not only the political environment that's happening in the country, but the political environment that has a business implication, like where you have to understand like how much they are going to bring about the foreign countries environment, how long they are going to play that, what benefit it will happen with the people. So there is another aspect of trade that you need to understand is when there is a differences in the business systems and practices. So when we talk about the business systems and practices, there are countries that differ in terms of business practices is when they differ in terms of like economic infrastructure, when they differ in terms of customs and practices, the socio-economic thing that we talk about, or when we talk about in terms of efficiency, cost, availability. Like India being one of the countries which still with its higher population base, it is one of the countries which has a higher labor intensive methods of production. Like when it comes to cost, when it comes to methods of production, it basically uses labor. As a result, if you'll see, we are not much dependent upon the machines. Like today, we are very much dependent on the machines and all. But if you'll see, cost-wise, efficiency-wise, we are one such market which is very much dependent on the laborer side. So that also you need to understand. That also you need to understand, like what is a business system and practices. Another aspect of unilateral trade is you have to understand what kind of merchandise you are exporting or what kind of merchandise you are importing. So when we are talking about export and import, we Indians have one such tendency of flaunting more about our products, that we are wearing this kind of brand from this kind of country rather than wearing one of our own brand from our own country. So that unilateral trade to a very certain extent depends upon how much we are, what is the ratio of export to what is the ratio of imports. So this was all about international trade, unilateral international trade. See, whenever it is like we are talking about international trade, it does not involve only products or it does not involve services. When we talk about international trade, there is another part that comes into existence, like something called as tourism. Tourism is also one part of international trade and it is one major part of your unilateral trade. टूरिज्म भी एक ऐसा सेक्टर होता है जहाँ पे लाइक वी हैव अ प्रेफरेंस और वी आल्सो डू ट्रेड ऑन दैट बेसिस लाइक देयर आर पीपल हु विजिट गोवा लाइक अभी के लिए नहीं बट वेन एवर ड्यूरिंग 2000 prior to 2020 this December Goa is one of the hotspots in India where tourists come because we have a, in terms of price we are much cheaper than other holiday destinations. Second is maybe like the culture of Goa is much suitable than any other part. But we Indians like instead of going for for all our local destination, we Indians also prefer going to other places, other destinations. So whenever there is that is happening, like Indians going to other destination and other country people coming to Indian destination, it is also one kind of trade that is happening and it is a part of your unilateral trade agreement. So am I clear till now? Are you people there? सब हो या कोई सो गए हो क्या? Thank God. Thank God. आज के लिए यहाँ रखूं या मल्टीलेटरल ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट स्टार्ट करूं? यहाँ पे रखूं या मल्टीलेटरल ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट स्टार्ट करूं? हाँ, वो यूनिलेटरल ट्रेड के जैसा ही है. मतलब यूनिलेटरल ट्रेड में आज तक एक नेशन के ऊपर हम फोकस करते आ रहे थे. मल्टीलेटरल ट्रेड में हम बहुत सारे नेशंस के ऊपर फोकस करके आएंगे. लाइक नेक्स्ट लेक्चर. ठीक है, ये आपका ओके फर्स्ट सब्जेक्ट का मैं नोट्स अपलोड कर दूंगी, नोट्स दे दूंगी आपके ग्रुप में. एंड सेकंड का as and when I finish I'll give it to you. नेक्स्ट क्लास के लिए कैन यू प्लीज रीड अबाउट द ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट्स. नेक्स्ट क्लास आने से पहले थोड़ा ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट्स के ऊपर पढ़ के आएंगे क्या? नेक्स्ट क्लास धीरे धीरे हमें बढ़ता जाएगा. देर आर समथिंग कॉल्ड एज सार्क कंट्रीज, देर आर समथिंग कॉल्ड एज नाफ्टा कंट्रीज. तो उसके ऊपर पढ़ना पड़ेगा, तो काइंडली थोड़ा पढ़ के आइएगा. ओके, तो शैल आई लीव द क्लास नाउ? Anything more you need to ask me? Thank you.
No, ma'am.